Hello everyone and welcome to Contact's webinar this afternoon. I'm Elaine Bennett, I'm the Press and Communications Manager at Contact, and I'm very pleased to be joined by Richard Hobbs, who's the Communications Lead at NNPCF and Somerset Parent Carer Forum steering group member. He'll be joining us to talk to you a little bit later on. I've just got to read through some of these slides here. So welcome to this Contact webinar. If there is a technical hitch, please do bear with us. Those of you joining by PC, laptop, tablet or smartphone should now be able to see this introduction slide. So this is about timings and questions. As there are so many attendees, it is not practical for verbal questions to be taken. Therefore, you will all remain muted throughout. But if at any point you have questions, please use the question icon on your GoToWebinar toolbar on your screen. This will allow you to type your question into the text box and submit this to the webinar administrator. And then I'll select as many relevant questions to answer as the time allows. If similar questions are received, I'll condense those where possible. Relevant questions not covered in the time allowed will be answered and posted on the Contact website, along with the recording of this webinar, and details of which will be circulated next week. At the end of the webinar, a short questionnaire will launch. Please take the time to complete this, as this will assist with future online training. Okay, so we're just going to kick off. I guess the big question is, so we're talking about traditional media here first, so we'll talk about social media a bit later on, but traditional media, so why talk to the press? And I think it is worth reflecting on the value of getting your name in the local press. So how can it help parent carer forums? So the main points here are it can help you reach more families. Local newspapers and radio stations and TV stations are read, listened and watched to by many people, and they're those people that you may not be in touch with yet. So there's an opportunity to attract new members through your local press. It's also a great way of raising awareness of the impact of your work. So parent carer forums, your work and activities bring about positive change for all families in the local area. And also you can build your profile with professionals locally and more widely. I think, so basically you're doing a great job and you're doing lots of important work and you should shout about it. And I think that in turn will bring you benefits. So it'll increase your profile. It may open up opportunities of bringing in new members. It could attract possible funders or catch the attention of professionals who want to work with you and get your expert input. It is possible to quantify the value of getting your name in the press. There's two recognised measures of the value of press coverage. So number one, kind of the first one, is about the reach. So this is kind of the readership or audience of a newspaper or radio or TV programme that you feature in. And the second measure is the equivalent advertising value. So that's the price that you would have to have paid in advertising costs to get the equivalent size or length of piece in the newspaper or on the radio. And I've just used this example. So this is of how these figures demonstrate the value of media work. So I've included a roundup of Contact's awards media coverage here. So it was our Together at 40 awards, which we held in the summer, and the associated media coverage that we got from that is shown here. So in the slide, you can see some of the outlets where the awards were featured. And then the combined audience for all these features was actually, the reach was 2 million, and the advertising values, the amount that we would have paid in advertising costs to get the equivalent space of coverage was £87,000. And generally we use these these figures in reports to, you know, for internal purposes, really, to share with colleagues and trustees, but it can help with funding bids too. And I think forums, you could show to your stakeholders how you're attracting new members through work in the media, and it shows, you can use it to show your members the impact of what you're doing. Selling your story. How do you sell your story? I think this truth diagram here is a really useful summary of what journalists are looking for in a story. So T, topical, of the moment, timely, new, and something people are talking about. So if you can link your story and what you're trying to say to something topical, that will really help. And I was thinking kind of, for example, if your forum is launching new family sessions or has improved disabled access to the beach, then sending it out in advance of the school holidays would be, you know, would be really a good time to send it out. It ties it in with that, and it will help to get your story picked up. Relevant to a specific audience. I mean, your stories will be relevant because they have the local angle. Local and regional papers and radio stations want to feature human interest stories from their patch, and that's what you will be offering. U for unusual, so something that's unique. If you can make your story, is it the first, is it the biggest? That will help sell your story. T for trouble, so show how you are solving a problem. I guess if you're launching a service or have an event planned, what is this trying to address? And I think it is good to spell out the issue because it does make for a better news story. For example, you could say that your coffee mornings or events are helping to reduce isolation of parent carers and explain why isolation is an issue. And H for human interest. So I'm sure you know, but journalists really want real life stories. And as forums, you have those at your fingertips. You are and you're in touch with lots of local parent carers who can talk about the situation and the difference that the forum is making to families in the area. And in your news story, you can explain what's in it for people and also include quotes from parent carers who are going to benefit. I think it's worth saying that newspaper audiences have declined over the last 20 years, but there are still hundreds of local newspapers around the country, and they're coming out weekly or daily. And there are also hundreds of local radio stations and regional news outlets, TV. And I think they are well regarded and often have large, faithful audiences. And they often have an online presence as well. And they need stories from local people to fill their news bulletins and newspapers. So I think there is a real opportunity for forums to get your name and your message out there. And I think it can feel like the press is always full of bad news and it's difficult to cut through with positive stories, but I think there is definitely a place for good news featuring local people. And so if you pitch your story right, and it's got a good chance of featuring in the local news. And also, local news is so under-resourced. So I think if you get your story right and get it to the right person, then I'm sure it will be gratefully received. And it is worth trying to get to know journalists. I'm sure a lot of forums will be in touch with your local journalists. I think it's good to try to build relationships with those people. So chatting, and you may see them at events, chat to them at events, or invite them along to something, launches or events that you are having. And as a kind of activity for you to think about over the next few weeks, I thought, I'll set you a challenge. Just how many of you know your local newspaper or radio station contacts? And if you don't know, over the next few weeks, why don't you take a bit of time to find out the details of those journalists, whether that's a general reporter or one that covers social affairs stories, and let me know how you get on. You know, you could if you have a story that at the moment or an event going on, get in touch with them, and I'd love to hear about your efforts and what the outcome is. Hopefully there'll be some positive responses. And here's just a couple of examples of forums in the press that I know I've just picked them randomly, and I know that I'll have missed many great examples, but these were ones that I just came across. So the first one, it was in the Gazette series in Gloucestershire about South Gloss parents and carers winning an award. It's a nice celebratory and congratulatory story. And the second story is from Nursery World online. Nursery World, they have a printed magazine as well, but this was from the online version. And it's about a new service for children, and it gives a nice plug to the Westminster Parent Carer Forum, who ensured that parent carers had fed into the development of this new centre, this new service. Writing a press release. We just thought it would be good to think about some tips for writing a good press release. So journalists are generally taught to get as many of the 5 W's, the who, what, where, why, and when, into the opening line of their news stories, and I think that's a good rule to follow when you're writing a press release as well. It's really key to be as brief as possible. The ideal length of a press release is about an A4 side, so that's just 300 or 400 words. So it's not a lot of room, especially if you're going to include a quote. But yeah, anything longer is just going to get lost. Quotes should be used to provide insight and opinion and sound like a real person said them. Really try to avoid jargon. And don't forget to include contact details, so a journalist can get in touch with you for further details, or they might want to arrange a photograph. If possible, it's a good idea, again, to look at what is going on in the news and time when you send out your press release. So avoid any major local events that you know about, because your story is likely to get lost. So choosing a quiet news week is the best. And if possible, have a case study, because as we talked about before, that journalists like the human interest angle and they like case studies. And I would say, as a further point, just it's important to get someone else to check your press release. So if you've written it or someone's written it, get a fresh pair of eyes to have a look over it, to kind of spot any mistakes in details or spelling or grammar. And I've just included here some press releases that Contact have put together. I've included event press releases rather than campaign ones, as I think these are probably more relevant to you. And I've just picked these out because they follow the rules from the last couple of slides. The first one was to promote a family event, and this could be sent to like a what's on editor of a newspaper. And I just thought, yeah, just to show you the layout of the press release and this notes to editors device here. So that's useful to keep the length of your press release down. You can put contact details in there, or the little explainer of who you are. The second example of a press release, so we were promoting a conference that was happening in Scotland about transitions, and it kind of using techniques that we talked about for selling a story. So the headline makes it unique and stand out by saying it's the first event of its kind. And in the press release, we tried to spell out the problem. So the problem is, the difficulties families face as their children are growing up. And how, and then showing that we are providing a form of a solution to that. So this event plus the new resources we've produced around transition are helping families at this time. And here are some more examples of forums using the press to promote their message. I think in both cases, yeah, they're announcing the relaunch of the Parent Carer Forum. So obviously letting parents in the area know that the new forum is up and running in order to get local parent carers involved. And I think it is a good launch pad for that kind of thing. Case studies. So we mentioned that, obviously, the human interest angle. So using real life stories to bring your news to life. It's what it's all about. And you as forums, you're in such a strong position because you are in touch with so many families. So lots of case studies to hand. And I think in a press release, if you add a quote from a parent, that's really helpful. I know as you steering group members, you're all parents, so you know, quotes from your chair or steering group members, that's going to be really valuable. And also, if you can arrange a picture of families for the press, that's always, I think, gratefully received. And I've just included an example here from Dorset Parent Carer Council, and their accessible beach huts. And obviously they've organised a picture here which is being used, and I'm not sure it would have worked as well without the picture. That's really brought it to life. So I know it's very difficult because you're doing all your work for the forums on a voluntary basis, but if you do have a chance to have a plan, I think it is it's important if you can plan out your activity for the year. And you could use a plan for all communications, so whether that's mailings to members or news stories, web updates, and posting on social media. So at Contact, we do an annual plan which pulls together all the different strands of our work. So fundraising, campaigns, help and guidance, information, key issues on our helpline, our events, and then any changes, launch of new services or new appointments. I think when you're looking at a plan, it's also good to think about awareness days. There's so many of these awareness days, and you might be able to use those to get your story, whatever you're doing, into the media. And in the plan, I think it's important if you decide who your spokesperson is going to be. So who's going to speak on behalf of your forum if you get asked for interview, and keep all the contact details of those people in one place. And that brings me to giving media interviews. So as a forum, you may get asked for an interview after you've sent out a press release, and that would be to give further detail to a newspaper or to do a piece for radio or TV. So if you are sending a story to the radio or TV, you need to think about who is going to do the interview. Just simple things you need to think about: who's going to be available at the time, and be clear about that before you send it out. And I mean, when you're promoting your own story, it is highly unlikely that you're going to be given difficult questions. I would imagine the interviews that forums are likely to get will be straightforward. The kind of questions that you'd likely to get would be, you know, tell us about what you've been doing, what difference will it make to families. But yeah, just for the purpose of this webinar, I thought it'd be interesting to look at examples of different media interviews to highlight the do's and don'ts of talking to the press. But I would like to say that, thankfully, I don't expect any of you to get the kind of grillings that these people get. But yes, you just have to bear with me as I load. I'm going to use a couple of these interviews. I'm not going to do all three. And the first one is a kind of example of a kind of bad case example.
Really been affected by austerity?
Well, I think the whole country has.
I'm asking about you.
Well, it's not about me, it's about
My
the whole
question's about
country.
you. How have you been affected? Have you been adversely affected?
Well, what I would say is that we have had a
I don't know why
period
it's funny.
where.
A lot of people have had a terrible time with austerity.
Eddie, I'm not laughing. I'm just questioning your question because.
Well, you leave the questions up to me. What's the answer to mine?
My answer is that all of us have been affected by the difficult decisions that had to be made. But what we have done is we've limited those difficult decisions. We've made sure we target money on the lowest incomes.
It would be okay, wouldn't it, to say you haven't been affected?
Well, I don't think it's a good question. I don't know what it means.
Well, I won't comment on your answer. Let me ask you a different question.
Okay, so that was an example there. Just bear with me a second. I need to get to back to the point in the presentation. But yeah, that was Liz Truss, Minister, being interviewed by Eddie Mair on LBC. And as I say, thankfully, none of us, I think, can expect that kind of grilling, but I think it is a good example of a bad preparation for a media interview. So, I mean, clearly she's unprepared and immediately becomes defensive, and that comes across really badly. I think obviously it goes without saying that you shouldn't laugh when discussing a serious matter. And I think, yeah, it would have been fine to say something like, I know I haven't been affected by austerity the way that some have, and I regret that some have been affected badly, but whatever. But the not answering the question gets her in a real mess. So I think that we can take something from that, I think. And I've got another example, so I'll just play one more video of, and this I think is an example of good practice. I think this spokesperson comes across well.
A severe flood warning, a threat to life warning. Is there still a risk the dam will break?
We're working on it with other agencies right now, but until we draw down the water in a very controlled way from the reservoir, there is still a risk. We clearly don't know the nature of the failure. We haven't had the opportunity to examine it, but we're operating in a very precautionary way with the other agencies. Our first priority is to draw down the water, and it's very important that we keep everyone out of the area until that is done. We're clearly very sorry for the disruptions it's causing to people. It must be awful to have to move out of your home overnight in this sudden way, but it's vital we keep everyone safe and put people's safety first until we can draw down the water from the reservoir.
So there's still a risk this dam could break. Of course, people are worried about their homes, even going back to them. How much longer do you think it's going to take? Have you got an estimate?
It's very hard to estimate because of all the factors involved. There's the pumps we've got to get into the reservoir to draw the water down and the rate at which they can work. There's water still flowing into the reservoir from upstream, and there's also the unknown factor of the weather. If there's more rain, that will also change things. So it will be, I think, at least 24 hours. It could be longer. It really depends on how much progress we can make overnight and into tomorrow morning, and we should be able to give better updates as the time goes forward. But at the moment, there's too many factors for us to be able to say with any certainty.
When did you last inspect this dam then?
It was inspected in a very, we do a series of inspections. There's an annual inspection done by a senior engineer. And there's actually a 10-yearly inspection done by an independent panel of reservoir engineers. Our reservoir.
Right, I'll leave that there. So yeah, I think that was an example of handling a media interview well. I mean, it's a very long interview, and later the interview becomes more challenging, but the spokesperson does remain calm and sticks to his message throughout. But I think it really shows how it's about being prepared is the main thing. He sounds very knowledgeable. He gives lots of detail, and I think he comes across well because his response started with a really sincere apology as well. So yeah, I think that was a good example of a media interview. And this is the final slide about kind of traditional media, but it also ties in with social media as well. So responding to a news story, because as a forum, you may get asked for a comment or interview when there has been a story in the local news that involves a parent carer or a child with a disability. And I think in these circumstances, you need to think carefully about what you want to respond to and what you feel you should leave. So at Contact, we have a protocol in place which helps us decide which media inquiries we are going to respond to. So here it shows kind of a series of questions that we ask ourselves. We do have priority areas that are kind of set out for us. So benefits and SEN are kind of areas of expertise that some of our colleagues have, so we can speak confidently about those areas. And then we have another one which is kind of changes all the time depending on what campaign we're running. But just some questions that you can ask. I mean, is your spokesperson available, I guess? And are there other organisations that might be better placed to respond to the story? But I think it's a useful conversation to have as a forum, as a steering group, what you want to respond to and what you want to leave. And I think this discussion will also help you with your social media work, you know, what you share, what you comment on, what you respond to. And that seamlessly leads me on to the social media part of the webinar, and how you can use social media to add value to your forum. I know lots of forums are doing this really, really well. And the benefits are very similar to using traditional media. You know, you can reach out to a wide audience with very little cost. I think when you're starting out or looking at your social media and how effective it is, first and foremost, think about your purpose. So why are you on social media and what are you trying to achieve? Is it to communicate and engage with parents? Is it to encourage more parents to attend your events? Or is it both? I think understanding this will help inform your tactics and the types of content you are sharing, as well as how much time you allocate to your social media account. And here's just a few examples of forums using social media to communicate with members and followers. I like how the use of images, to make it look, you know, really nice, visual and engaging. So again, I think it is important to have a plan. To set out messages you want to share and think about the content your audience will be interested in. So, and again, it's kind of repeating myself, but be clear when you are going to respond. You've got to balance responding in a timely way and with making sure that your response is thought through. So here's Contact's strategy, social media strategy. I won't read it out because it's very straightforward. And the content we also have, so we've got the strategy which kind of talks about how we're going to use social media and why, and then the content plan. So this is just thinking about the content that we want to get out to our audience, and we break it down into various areas. So there's policy and campaigns, help and guidance, and fundraising. And so that ensures that that regular, timely content each month. And it also means with this plan, so you have a bank of these messages, and it means that you're not starting from scratch each time. So content, it's just so important, isn't it? And we, you know, consider posting content that sparks an emotional reaction. I think you're more likely to see high engagement with these kind of posts. And, you know, also consider the language used on social media posts. You know, don't be afraid to have a voice and share your opinion, although you've got to back up. You've got to defend your opinion if should there be replies. Also, think quality over quantity. It's better to share less content that's going to be of interest to your audience rather than lots of content that is less relevant and won't be engaged with. Yes, social media platforms actually penalise pages that don't have good engagement, so your ranking will go down and your post will be seen by less people. So I think it's good to have in your mind. Think quality over quantity. We've found sharing topical news stories sourced from the nationals often perform well on our social media channels. And we often try and link the news item to our own content and resources. So we recently posted an article about school transport, and then, you know, it was a BBC News article, and then we mentioned the fact that school transport is a top issue on our helpline, and then signposted to some of our online advice. Visual content tends to perform better. I'm sure you've all got images, photographs and pictures. If you did need if you need more, there are copyright free image banks, and I've listed a couple here: Pixabay or Unsplash. Videos, so moving pictures tend to perform well. And if you don't have your own content, then you can, you know, third-party content works really well. On Twitter, you might consider setting up a list of accounts that share good content, you know, that you think your audience will like, and then you've got somewhere that you can go to retweet. It's always good to try to add your own comment where possible. And Q&As work well on Facebook. Contact. We run regular Q&As with our parent advisors, and the most recent one about school transport had really high levels of engagement. And again, so thinking about awareness days you can promote. So just even if picking a handful a year, something, wishing all the mums and grandmothers a happy Mother's Day, and the same for Father's Day. And there's so many, I'm sure, as you know, there's so many awareness days. Carers Week, there's a Changing Places Awareness Day, the International Day of Disabled Persons. So all these days you could just really a good opportunity just to send a message to your audience. So I've pulled together some examples of social media content that made an impact. The first example shows where an emotional response generates high engagement. So we used kind of most emotive language here when we shared this third-party news story, and we had a large level of engagement from parents. So it was 125 reactions and 64 comments. The second example is a video from the BBC News, and it's a really nice positive news story, and again generated a large response and good levels of engagement. And here's some nice examples of social media content from forums that I dug out. Again, really warm, friendly, colourful posts. They're visual and inviting. They're personal as well, using pictures and images. And you know, they all get good levels of engagement. So with your social media, I think it's really important to have clear guideline on your pages, because that helps to manage the expectations of your followers. Just yes, so I think it's important to state clearly when the page will be checked and the kind of content that you're going to share. I've just, here you can see the guidelines from Contact's Facebook page. I'm sure this is kind of standard text that lots of people use, but yes, I think it's useful to say. So the page is moderated Monday to Friday, 9:30 till 5, and the kind of behavior that we expect and posts that will be hidden. It just manages expectations. So responding to difficult posts or queries. So when dealing with difficult queries, it can be helpful to take it offline rather than having it play out in front of everyone. But we have to be careful not to look like you're covering up. And this example I found on the Media First blog, which I would really recommend to anyone that's interested in social media and media. They've got some really interesting blogs about good practice and bad practice. So here, the original tweet from a person about it shows a picture of a backless seat on an EasyJet flight. But it just shows how the response from EasyJet actually inflamed the situation. So in response, EasyJet asks the person to take down the photograph. And as you can see by people's responses, this does not play well with the public, because it sounds like they're covering up, and it sounds like it comes across as defensive and maybe a little bit aggressive as well. So obviously, a better approach would have been something like, "Thanks for bringing this to our attention. We're urgently looking into what's happened here," and something like, we will direct message you to get more information. But because of the ill thought through response, EasyJet did receive lots of, they kind of created a Twitter storm, and then the next day it was actually featured negatively in the newspapers and the press as well. So yeah, I think it's just, I wanted to use that as an example of how, just to make you think about how we should respond to difficult comments or queries, because I think on social media, yeah, there is a need to respond quickly, but you also need to give yourself time to think about the best response and maybe ask someone else for their opinion, because I think talking it through can help. At Contact, we judge our response on social media just on a case-by-case basis, but follow some general principles. So generally, if we are asked a direct question or someone says something about us that isn't true, we would respond, because I think we're expected to, and we want to be able to clarify. But yeah, in some cases we might try to take it offline and direct message people. But sometimes it's better not to respond. If, for instance, contacts are mentioned in a conversation among a few people, but they are not asking us a direct question, we weigh up whether it's better to leave it. Sometimes responding does fan the flames. And this was just to send you, just to have a think about that yourselves. So a little bit of homework for you. Just to think about how you would respond differently to the following. So whether it's a difficult question that you get through Twitter or Facebook, an angry follower, or a friendly inquiry, and go through the process of how would you respond to each one. And I think going through that process and discussing it will help to form some basic principles that you can work from. So hopefully that will be helpful. Right, and at this point I'm going to hand over to Richard. As I mentioned, Richard from the NNPCF and Somerset Parent Carer Forum is joining us to say a few words about media and social media. Thanks, Richard.
Hello. Basically, I've recently taken over the position of communications lead for the NNPCF. We're looking at improving our media plan and trying to make sure that we're capturing the right audience and promote the NNPCF, making it more visible than it is at the moment. So a lot of that is in the process at the moment. We already have a NNPCF closed group, which is for the members of parent carer forums, but we also have an NNPCF main page as well, which we're looking at how we can best show how we're working, but also we can share what our key partners are doing as well. So we can generate good conversations around that side of things. The main reason I became the comms lead is because of the good work that I've been putting in place along with my colleagues in Somerset Parent Carer Forum, and I thought it'd probably be a good idea to just talk about some of those areas for a few minutes. The first thing that we did was that we built up good relationships with the different media companies, such as BBC Somerset, which is the local radio station, and Glastonbury FM, which is the next major one in the area. BBC Points West and ITV West Country, we've contacted both of them and we've given them interviews over certain things that have happened in the Somerset region. And also Somerset Live, which is a virtual newspaper, I think you'd probably say. It's published both through social media and on its own website as well. This has caused us to be invited to other groups as well to give interviews. We're regularly being contacted now for our opinions on situations regarding special educational needs and disability as they happen in the area. Local papers have been posting events that we've put on. We reach out to those and advertise any events that we put on, such as last year we put on a big Send information day to try and help parents meet those that are in the local authority in the CCG that carry out a lot of their plans, their educational EHC plan assessments and things like that, so they could talk to caseworkers, they could talk to SENDIAS as well, and also have some workshops around different elements such as whole school send and how to recognise and help children with autism and social, emotional and mental health. All that went into the press, and that helped to generate good feedback from other organisations. We also regularly do training for parent carers, and we get funds from different organisations where basically a company may want to offset some money towards their tax, so they want to give funds out to good causes, and we apply for those, and quite often they want to be present so that they can have a nice press release of them handing over an oversized cheque for a certain amount so that it all looks good for them. But it benefits us because we get recognition that we're putting on these events for parents and carers, and it really does help to make us very visible as an organisation. Looking at social media, our Facebook, we have at the moment around 1,600 followers, and we get peak reach of around about 40,000 quite regularly. We have one video at the moment where we got permission to Facebook Live the CCG AGM, and that is just over 2.5 thousand views at the moment. We also took the decision, because obviously we have a lot of social isolation and we're quite spread out, so travelling is quite difficult, that we would Facebook Live the public part of our steering group meetings, and that regularly has between 300 to 500 views whilst the steering group is happening. We have a Twitter following of 820, and we also have, because we're so spread out, we have a virtual peer-to-peer support group, closed group on Facebook, which has 857 members. For all this social media, we've had to create some very tight rules, both on the closed group and also on the main page. We do not permit naming and shaming. We make the rules quite clear within those pages that we were not going to accept things like that. And also for our administrators, we make sure that they realise that quite often there can be quite a lot of negativity around Send, and it's very easy to get drawn into arguments that nobody is going to win, because nobody really wants an answer for it, they just want to vent. So we have quite tight rules about not getting involved in those types of arguments on or disputes on social media. So that we try and keep everything sort of encouraging and positive on this side. I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. So I will now hand you back to my colleague at Contact, Elaine Bennett.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Richard. That's great. Lots of brilliant work that's happening. So that's the end of the presentation. I'm just going to respond to some of the questions that we've had during the webinar. So Lucy has asked a few questions actually. So that asked if Contact has a list of good Twitter accounts that we can share, and yes, I think that we do. I'm not actually responsible for our social media. We have one dedicated person who does social media, and I'm pretty sure that we've got a list that we can share with you of yes, I guess people who put content out that appeals to our audience, and that we get good levels of engagement with. So I can, and bloggers and things like that, so I can certainly share that. I know the webinar is going to be shared later this afternoon, so but if I kind of can share those things in the next week or so, that I can do that. And also Lucy asked, can we share our plan or a blank template for a plan, and I'm happy to do that if that's helpful to you. And another question that Lucy sent through was around, is there any, so on the back of media coverage that parent carer forums have got, is there any proof that it led to getting new members? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe if anyone who's listening to the webinar today and has had positive experience of that you could message me with your experiences and I can share that. I know in terms of when Contact gets media coverage, that we do see a slight, I mean, obviously it depends on what it is, but I think we definitely have had spikes in calls to the helpline or hits to the website following media coverage. And I think that's often from people that didn't know about us before. So yes, I think kind of anecdotally, I would say that is the case. And let me see, one more question from Ruth, another question from Ruth. about how we support case studies. So yes, we do use, we ask parents to share their experiences in the media, because that's often, as we said, what journalists are looking for. And I would say that we're just very careful to brief them fully on who's going to be doing the interview. We would ask the journalist the kind of questions that they're going to be asked, and run through those with the case study. And you know, kind of advise them if there's something that they don't want to speak about, then that's fine. It's fine for them to say that. And yeah, just kind of to support them through that, talk them through the likely questions, and you know, follow up with them afterwards, make sure. I mean, often it's a very positive experience, and parents get a lot out of it. And I think there's another question that's come in. I'll just take this one last question, and I think Jane asks, is there a list of awareness days out there anywhere, please? Well, if there is, please let us know, because that's something that we've been looking for a long time. I think probably each organisation probably has a list of their own awareness days. I can certainly share what we've got and the days that we think are of interest to our audience, and I'm sure that there'll be huge crossover with your members. So I'm happy to do that, because yeah, there's so many of them. It's very difficult to keep track of, but we do have a list that we work from.
I've got a few more questions through.
Okay.
I'll just read them out for you to make it as swift as possible. So Fiona has asked if there is a list of awareness days.
Yeah, okay. So that was, I think Jane had asked that as well. So yes, we're, as I said, we've been looking for a list of like a comprehensive list of awareness days for years. We've compiled our own list, and I'm happy to share that with forums if that's helpful to them. Obviously the awareness days that we've kind of pulled together are the ones that appeal to our audience, but I'm sure that there'll be huge crossover with the forum. So yes, we can do that. And is there another question, Helen?
Okay, actually, sorry, Fiona has actually just shared a list, a link to a list of awareness days, so I'll ensure that that's sent around to everybody this afternoon. Has also asked whether other forums find that members are more likely to turn up to events in the evening or the daytime.
We do find that we try and put on events in the afternoon into evening. We find it difficult because obviously parents that have their children at school obviously find it freer to get to events in the afternoon while their child is still at school. But there are also quite a few that like to come to events in the evening because they may have a partner that can look after the child, so that frees them up to go. So we find there's those two brackets of parents. So we try and spread any events over the two time gaps to allow both groups to attend in Somerset.
And in response to Lucy's question about using media and social media to attract new members, Richard, you gave a great response.
Yes, we took over the running of the forum in the end of 2015. So 2016 to 2017 was the first year that we were putting social media really to good use. We also put on our website a link for people to visit our website. They could join up our newsletter, and then they would be contacted to be asked if they would like to join our membership. That first year we got a 230% increase in our membership, and our membership we have seen is linked to our social media. The more things that we put out there to encourage people in Somerset around SEND, what's going on, letting them know how we're working to promote and support parents and carers with SEND, we do see that it does bring parents to us to join up our membership.
Okay, and I've got just one last question here, and I think this does look like the last one. This is from Jo Marie, and she's asked that given that forums vary greatly in available time and income, what are the cheapest quick wins and tips that you would recommend?
Well, I mean, I think from what Richard was saying there about, I'm not entirely sure how much time they invested into the social media side of things, but obviously they've it's paid dividends, hasn't it, in terms of that 230% increase in membership. And I do think social media is something you can do with, it's like relatively little cost and not too much resource needed. So to have a social media plan for the year, I think would be and kind of pool resources into developing content and using that. I think that you would definitely see the rewards of that. Well, thank you to Helen for her help and Richard today. And thank you to everyone who's joined us. I hope that you found it interesting. Thank you so much.